Imagine if Yu-Gi-Oh! Stripped away its tournaments, abandoned the wide-eyed protagonist who preaches the power of friendship, and forgot all about the ever-iconic Heart of the Cards. On paper, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. I mean, why would anyone watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Without its defining elements? But believe it or not, this version already exists, and it's the foundation for the most fascinating entry in the entire franchise. Enter Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, hands down the most ambitious Yu-Gi-Oh! Series since the original. And no, I'm not talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, I mean the original 1998 series depicting early Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga chapters. Much like that overlooked gem of the franchise, VRAINS is bold, daring, and genuinely dark. And when I say dark, I don't mean in the overly casual way that the fandom often does. VRAINS embraces themes and tones that push the boundaries for what a Yu-Gi-Oh! Series can truly be. It's a show that defies conventions in ways we hadn't seen in years, and somehow it nails every single one of its unconventional elements. But before diving into what makes Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS so special, it's important to note that this video will be based on the Japanese version of the show. Over the years, English adaptations of Yu-Gi-Oh! Have become notorious for toning down darker themes and reworking significant parts of the story. Unfortunately, VRAINS wasn't immune to this treatment. Critical plotlines were softened, and in some cases, entirely removed in the English dub, leaving a watered-down version that fails to capture the show's original depth and intensity. If you want to experience VRAINS as it was meant to be, the Japanese version is the way to go. Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS takes place in a not-so-distant future where technology is inseparable from daily life. That includes duel monsters. Unsurprisingly, the card game remains immensely popular, but it has evolved to integrate seamlessly with cutting-edge artificial intelligence. Each duel disc now features an AI assistant, essentially a Siri for duel monsters. It helps explain card effects and offers basic gameplay tips. While not advanced enough to devise complex strategies or duel independently, this AI makes the game far more accessible without compromising its depth. Yet the real revolution lies in the rise of virtual reality. Most of the story unfolds in Link VRAINS, an expansive VR network where duelists immerse themselves as digital avatars. This virtual battleground is more than just a venue for duels. It's a sprawling, neon-lit world that is fun for competition as well as exploration, and this new technological age has given birth to the phenomenon known as charisma duelists, entertainers who blend skillful gameplay with electrifying showmanship. These duelists are the celebrities of Link VRAINS, captivating audiences with their distinct avatars and dramatic performances. Think of them as a fusion of professional duelists and social media influencers, drawing followers and fame through their ability to connect with the crowd as much as their card-playing prowess. I know that sounds a bit like entertainment duelists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, but the concept was never explored all that deeply in Arc 5. Entertainment duelists were nothing more than people who duel in a way that's entertaining. Charisma duelists in Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS focus less on flashy tricks during duels and more on cultivating an online persona. Go Onizuka, for example, the most popular charisma duelist in the world, modeled his duelist persona after a professional wrestler. His avatar is a towering, muscle-bound figure designed to project dominance and captivate his fans. But Go's persona isn't just about strength, it's about connecting with his audience. When he's not dueling, he spends a lot of time with underprivileged children. This is why his fans look up to him as not only someone who brings excitement to the dueling world, but as an inspiration and a role model. The strong attachment to their personas is what draws so many into their duels. Broadcast throughout all of Link VRAINS, each duel is an event, a spectacle that keeps viewers on the edge of their seats. This emphasis on audience engagement gives the dueling culture of VRAINS a distinctly modern, almost meta quality, resonating with our own era of digital fame. But beneath the vibrant surface of Link VRAINS lies a darker narrative of corporate ambition, moral ambiguity, and the race to control the future. For years, a shadow war has quietly raged on between Seoul Technologies, the powerful corporation that created Link VRAINS, and the Knights of Hanoi, a mysterious group of hackers. This conflict, centered around the pursuit of the Ignis, a group of sentient AI with potentially world-altering abilities, forms the backbone of Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS and sets the stage for its deeper themes. Seoul Technologies represents the unchecked ambition of corporate power, wielding its influence over Link VRAINS to solidify its dominance in pursuit of profit at all costs. While their methods are typical of dystopian corporate villains, data manipulation, invasive surveillance, and ethically questionable experiments, they also reflect the darker consequences of technological advancement. The stakes are raised with the discovery of the Ignis, whose advanced capabilities are coveted by Seoul Technologies. Viewing these AI as the key to future innovation and control, The corporation spares no expense in tracking them down. On the other side of the coin, we have the Knights of Hanoi, a faction operating outside of the law, but with motives that are far from black and white. Led by the mysterious Revolver, the Knights see the Ignis as a threat to humanity's survival. They believe that the rise of sentient AI will inevitably lead to human extinction, and they are determined to destroy the Ignis before that future becomes reality. Their extreme methods, hacking into systems and even using deadly force, raise questions about the cost of their cause. While their mission may seem noble on the surface, the lengths they're willing to go to achieve it paint them as dangerous and untrustworthy. This clash between Sol Technologies and the Knights of Hanoi presents a race between two factions, both morally compromised to capture the Ignis. Caught in the crossfire of this shadow war is the series protagonist, Yusaku Fujiki. Unlike the two factions vying for control over the Ignis, Yusaku isn't driven by power or ideology. He's motivated by revenge. His entire involvement in this conflict stems from a traumatic event known as the Lost Incident, during which he was abducted and forced to endure experiments related to artificial intelligence. This past has left him scarred and deeply distrustful of pretty much everyone and everything. Yusaku doesn't initially seek out the Ignis, but when he does find one, the Dark Ignis named Ai, after discovering that the Knights of Hanoi are desperate to capture it themselves, he seizes the opportunity. To Yusaku, Ai is not a companion or partner, but a tool, one that he can use to draw out the Knights, uncover the truth behind the Lost Incident, and finally confront the architects of his suffering. This pragmatic, almost cold approach sets Yusaku apart from every other Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist. While past heroes fought for camaraderie, justice, or the thrill of competition, Yusaku fights because he finds it necessary to move forward in his life. His relationship with Duel Monsters is purely utilitarian. Unlike Yugi, Jaden, or Yusei, who viewed the game as a bridge to friendship and personal growth, Yusaku treats dueling as a means to an end, devoid of joy or passion. In fact, he actively dislikes the game, a stark contrast to the franchise's central theme of finding friendship through shared passion. Several years before the series begins, Yusaku was among several children abducted as part of an experiment. These children were forced into a harrowing experience where they dueled against primitive AI programs, day in and day out. The goal of the experiment was to help AI learn and evolve, shaping them into the advanced entities later known as the Ignis. The rationale for using Duel Monsters is rooted in their belief that the game reveals a person's true character. While this logic may seem strange, at first I definitely thought it was way too silly for a tragic backstory, it fits perfectly within the world of Yu-Gi-Oh!, where dueling is an almost universal language. That's why this ordeal was so deeply traumatic. Trapped in an endless cycle of duels, he had no control over his circumstance and no way to escape. What most people viewed as a fun game became a tool of oppression, a symbol of his imprisonment. This perversion of the game left Yusaku unable to see it as a source of joy, and it colored his perception of dueling for years to come. Even after his rescue, Yusaku struggled to reintegrate into society. The Lost Incident left him doubtful, closed off, and consumed by his desire for revenge. His inability to separate Duel Monsters from his trauma made it nearly impossible for him to connect with others. In a world where dueling was the dominant form of social interaction, Yusaku's aversion to the game became an insurmountable barrier to forming friendships. Where past Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonists used the game to create bonds, Yusaku saw it as a reminder of his suffering. This disconnect from the heart of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is what makes Vrains so compelling. For a franchise synonymous with the power of friendship, Yusaku's story is a bold departure. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been about forming bonds through games, but Vrains dares to ask, what happens when the protagonist rejects the game? The answer is Yusaku Fujiki, and his journey challenges the very foundation of the franchise. Now, I do want to point out that subverting a trope isn't always a good thing. It's often done purely for shock value, and this can lead to a hollow story. What sets Vrains apart is how it uses this subversion to enhance its narrative, rather than undermine it. Friendship remains a major theme, but it's filtered through the perspective of someone deeply scarred by their past and fundamentally distrustful of others. Yusaku's rejection of friendship isn't just a gimmick. It's a reflection of the long-lasting impact of trauma, explored thoughtfully against the backdrop of a world where technology is threatening to replace genuine human connection. This layered approach not only makes Yusaku's struggle relatable, seeing as parasocial relationships are on the rise in real life, but also amplifies the emotional weight of Yusaku's eventual transformation. As he gradually begins to open up to others, the moments of connection feel earned, resonating more deeply than the franchise's traditional depictions of camaraderie. By turning the power of friendship into something fragile and hard-won, Vrains redefines one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most enduring themes in a way that feels both fresh and profoundly realistic. But even at that, Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains isn't so one-dimensional. Go Onizuka's story serves as a poignant counterpoint to Yusaku's journey, highlighting the costs of a life defined by external validation. As the world's most popular charisma duelist, Go thrives on the adoration of his fans. But beneath his larger-than-life exterior lies a man whose entire identity is tied to the applause of the crowd. When that applause begins to fade, Go's carefully constructed world starts to unravel, revealing the dark side of being a professional entertainer. From the very beginning, Go believes that the world of Link Vrains revolves around himself. He's the quintessential showman, a beloved figure who balances his fame with charity work, often spending time with underprivileged youth. While Go claims this is his primary motivation, the truth is more complicated. His charity work is genuine, but it also serves as a coping mechanism, a way to convince himself that his role as a hero matters more than his rank or popularity. This self-reassurance begins to falter when Yusaku enters Link Vrains as Playmaker and steals the spotlight. What makes Playmaker's rise so unbearable for Go isn't just the loss of status, it's the way Yusaku completely disregards him. Unlike Go, who lives for the cheers of the crowd, Yusaku is indifferent to fame and sees dueling purely as a means to an end. This apathy cuts deep, as Go is used to being the center of attention, even among his rivals. When he realizes that Yusaku's success is purely coincidental and not part of some deliberate challenge to his legacy as the #1 charisma duelist, it sends Go into a downward spiral. If his fans stop cheering, and his rival doesn't even notice, what was the point in rising to the top in the first place? Go's attempts to salvage his identity begin with denial. He continues his charity work, telling himself that being an inspiration to the youth is what truly matters. But deep down, he can't settle for anything less than being #1. The cheers grow quieter as his ranking drops further, eventually slipping out of the top 50. The man who once stood as the pinnacle of Link Vrains now finds himself not only overshadowed, but completely irrelevant. The silent void left by his fans is too much to bear, and Go's desperation pushes him to make a choice that changes his life forever. In a bid to reclaim his former glory, Go decides to focus solely on taking down Playmaker. Joining a bounty hunting group hired by Soul Technologies, he accepts a dangerous mission: capture Playmaker at any cost. This decision marks the beginning of Go's moral decline. No longer the selfless hero who inspired millions, he becomes a tool of a corporation that values profits over principles. His once vibrant persona fades as his actions grow increasingly ruthless. Desperate to level the playing field, Go takes an even darker step, implanting an AI chip in his brain. This transformation into a cyborg is both a literal and metaphorical representation of his downfall. The man who once thrived on human connection now surrenders to technology, becoming a shell of his former self. The cybernetic enhancement amplifies his dueling abilities, but strips him of the warmth and charisma that made him beloved in the first place. What sets Go apart from the other duelists in Vrains is the level of dedication he brings to his craft. His avatar in Link Vrains is identical to his real-life appearance, a rare choice in a world where most create elaborate digital identities. For Go, there is no distinction between the entertainer and the man. His persona is his reality. This blurring of identity underscores the all-consuming nature of his ambition. To be the best, Go sacrifices everything: his principles, his humanity, and ultimately, his connection to the very people he once inspired. Go Onizuka's arc is one of Vrains' most poignant. It explores what happens when the cheers go silent and the identity built around external validation begins to collapse. While Yusaku's journey revolves around rejecting connection due to trauma, Go's downfall illustrates the emptiness of living solely for the acceptance of others. His story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of tying self-worth to fleeting recognition in a world increasingly defined by digital fame. Now, before we go any further, I want to address a common misconception. Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS often draws comparisons to Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which is another series that pushed the franchise into uncharted territory. Both explore mature themes and introduce innovative ways to duel. However, while similarities are definitely there, VRAINS stands out as the superior execution of these ideas. Let's start by addressing the most obvious parallel: the use of transportation during duels. In 5Ds, we got D-Wheels, essentially motorcycles for dueling. On paper, it sounded innovative, but in practice, it was baffling. Why duel on motorcycles? Kazuki Takahashi himself, the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh!, claimed in an interview that he originally envisioned motorcycles as a means for characters to travel, not as part of the duels themselves. He wanted to break away from the static locations that plagued Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. The studio, however, doubled down and made motorcycles central to the dueling. To make matters even worse, the characters stay within the confines of Neodomino City for 99% of the series anyway. This resulted in the complete opposite of Takahashi's vision. Instead of vibrant scenery and mobility, 5D's duels became oddly constrained, and the justification for motorcycles felt non-existent. By contrast, VRAINS uses hoverboards, but with purpose. These aren't just flashy props for duels. They're part of the show's immersive visualization of the virtual world. When characters data surf through the digital landscape, the hoverboards act as a metaphor for navigating the ever-shifting terrain of cyberspace. This mode of travel isn't limited to duels either. Characters often explore the VR world to mine data, investigate hidden areas, and evade pursuers, with each scenario uniquely visualized. For example, deep dives into the system resemble underwater exploration, reinforcing the digital theme. These aren't arbitrary design choices, they enhance the narrative and immerse viewers in the setting. Even the dueling changes to reflect the travel element. In VRAINS, speed duels are introduced specifically for duels that occur during hoverboard sequences. These shorter, faster-paced matches mirror Duel Links gameplay, making perfect sense for scenarios where characters are on the move or in a time-sensitive situation. Unlike 5Ds, where writing duels dragged on with little narrative justification, VRAINS tailors its duel mechanics to the story's needs, creating a seamless blend of action and strategy. The second parallel is the depiction of heavy themes. 5Ds tackled class struggles and systemic corruption, but its tone often wavered between gritty realism and overly optimistic idealism. The show seemed torn between its ambition to tell a mature story and the need to cater to a younger demographic, resulting in a massive tonal imbalance. VRAINS navigates this balance with more finesse. Its darker narrative doesn't shy away from depicting real consequences. Characters face death, imprisonment, paralysis, and emotional scars that linger throughout the story. Yusaku's trauma from the Lost Incident drives his every action, and his journey isn't about overcoming it overnight, it's about learning to live with it. The show's themes of loneliness and connection are woven into the very fabric of its world, making them feel integral rather than tacked on for dramatic effect. Even the villains reflect this shift in tone. Where 5D's antagonists often fell into black and white morality, VRAINS gives us characters like Revolver and Blood Shepherd, whose actions, while extreme, are grounded in not only understandable, but at times completely justifiable motivations. Their clashes with Yusaku don't just highlight opposing ideologies, they reveal the shared pain and loneliness that define the series. Where 5Ds falters by juggling its darker aspirations with its need to appeal to younger audiences, VRAINS fully embraces its identity. It recognizes that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise can explore mature storytelling without losing its core appeal. The result is a series that not only learns from 5D's missteps, but refines its ideas, making them resonate on a deeper level. And when we compare the protagonists, another key difference emerges. Yusei never truly walked alone. Sure, Jack betrayed him and Yusei left his old friends behind when he left Satellite District, but as he ventured into Neodomino City, he quickly made a bunch of new friends. People he met in jail, fellow signers, and others willing to help. And while revenge may have seemed like a driving factor, Yusei's real motivation wasn't fueled by it. He wanted to reclaim his Stardust Dragon, but once he did, before even defeating Jack, he was ready to return home. He only dueled Jack for the King of Games title because he was forced to in order to protect his friends back at Satellite District. Yusei's story was never about revenge. Yusaku, on the other hand, is defined by revenge. His inability to make friends, his struggle to trust anyone, and his general disdain for duel monsters all circle back to the Lost Incident. He associates duel monsters with his trauma. He was lured into that nightmare by someone who posed as a friend. In short, Yusaku's entire worldview is shaped by betrayal and suffering. Unlike Yusei, who was never fully isolated and never truly motivated by vengeance, Yusaku openly declares his thirst for payback multiple times. He chooses vengeance over altruism when they conflict, and he repeatedly rejects opportunities for companionship if they threaten to compromise his mission. This makes Yusaku a true lone wolf character, and his isolation has genuine narrative weight behind it. It's not just a gimmick. By fully embracing a protagonist defined by revenge, Vrains delivers an emotional journey that is starkly different from what we saw in 5Ds. It's this willingness to commit to its protagonist's bitter motivation that sets Vrains apart and makes it a standout chapter in the franchise's history. Another element of Vrains that is unlike anything else we've ever seen is the rivalry between Yusaku and Revolver. While iconic foils like Kaiba, Chaz, and Jack Atlas stood out for their towering egos, Revolver brings a whole new approach. His motivations, steeped in an unwavering sense of responsibility, make him feel less like a typical antagonist and more like a tragic hero. As it happens, the Lost Incident was orchestrated by Dr. Kogami, a scientist at Soul Technologies. His aim was to develop artificial intelligence capable of preserving humanity's legacy long after humans are gone. During these experiments, another child, who would later become Revolver, offered Yusaku the life-saving advice: think of 3 things that give you hope. It was a simple mantra, but it anchored Yusaku's spirit throughout unimaginable suffering. Soon after the experiments, Dr. Kogami realized the Ignis posed a threat to mankind's survival. Simulations suggested the Ignis would turn against humanity, prompting Dr. Kogami to try and destroy them. But by then, it was already too late. Horrified by the children's cries, Revolver alerted the authorities, leading to their rescue and causing the Ignis to flee the facility. Years later, at the end of the first story arc, Yusaku discovers Revolver was the boy who gave him hope back then, and this revelation alters his entire worldview. Up to this point, Yusaku's driving force has been vengeance, a laser-focused desire to find those responsible for his pain. Learning that Revolver saved him forces Yusaku to confront the futility of his anger. It becomes a pivotal moment for him, allowing him to finally let go of his thirst for revenge. But for Revolver, this same truth has the opposite effect, because Dr. Kogami is Revolver's father. During the Lost Incident, his decision to expose the illegal activities saved Yusaku and the other children, but resulted in his father's capture. Publicly declared dead, Kogami effectively vanished, leaving Revolver consumed by guilt. In his mind, obeying his conscience is what cost him his father, and he vows never to betray him again as he carries on his father's mission to destroy the Ignis. This is where their rivalry truly shines. As Yusaku begins to move forward, finding a path to hope, and gradually learning to trust others, Revolver becomes further restricted by the chains of his regret. Their diverging journeys create a tension that goes far beyond mere hero versus villain, making their rivalry one of the most riveting in Yu-Gi-Oh! The relationship Yusaku has with his closest ally is quite unique as well. While Yusaku is often portrayed as a lone wolf, he isn't technically alone. His closest companion, Shoichi Kusanagi, plays an integral role in his quest for vengeance. However, Kusanagi is more of a sidekick than a friend. Their relationship is transactional, built on necessity rather than camaraderie. Like Yusaku, Kusanagi has a personal stake in bringing down those responsible for the Lost Incident. His younger brother Jin was among the kidnapped children. Unlike Yusaku, however, Jin never truly recovered from the experience. The trauma left him mentally broken, stripping him of his ability to function normally. This devastating reality is what fuels Kusanagi and aligns his goals with Yusaku's. Kusanagi is Yusaku's primary support system, providing him with intelligence, hacking abilities, and a physical base of operations. He handles much of the behind-the-scenes work that allows Playmaker, Yusaku's avatar, to function so effectively in Link Vrains. But while Kusanagi does provide a lot of support, he never challenges Yusaku's emotional detachment. He encourages Yusaku's mission instead of guiding him toward healing. What makes their dynamic so interesting to me is that it's a partnership of circumstance rather than a genuine friendship. Unlike past Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonists who build a strong circle of companions throughout their journeys, Yusaku keeps Kusanagi at arm's length. He values Kusanagi's contributions, but remains emotionally closed off. And Kusanagi, for all his concern, never pushes Yusaku to move forward or let go of his pain, because deep down, he doesn't want to let go of his own either. Before we continue, a quick word about today's sponsor, you guys. If you're enjoying this video and want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. With your membership, you'll unlock exclusive emotes to use in the comments of my videos and live chat when I stream. I'll be streaming a lot more often now that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection is out, and most of the playthrough will be set to members only after the fact. It might seem like a small way to support the channel, but trust me, it makes a huge difference. So if you want to join an awesome community and help keep the content going, hit that join button below, and let's get back to the video. After the fall of the Knights of Hanoi, Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS shifts focus dramatically. Yusaku's mission of revenge is over, but rather than stepping away from battle, he finds himself entangled in an even greater conflict, one that pits humanity against the very AI he once distrusted. Despite his initial indifference toward Ai, Yusaku has come to believe in coexistence. Ai proved himself in the final battle against Revolver, demonstrating that the Ignis aren't just self-learning programs, they're sentient, capable of trust, loyalty, and even self-sacrifice. For the first time, Yusaku sees the Ignis as more than just remnants of the past, and he takes it upon himself to ensure they have a place in the world. But that belief is challenged when disaster strikes. The Cyberse world, the digital sanctuary created by the Six Ignis, has been completely destroyed. Once a thriving domain where AI could evolve freely without human interference, it is now nothing more than ruins, and no one knows who is responsible. For Yusaku, this moment is terrifying. It confirms that someone, somewhere, is actively working to ensure that AI and humans can never coexist. This launches Yusaku into a new mission, not only to locate and protect the surviving Ignis, but also to find out who is behind the fall of their world. However, he's not the only one looking for answers. His journey leads him to cross paths with another survivor of the Lost Incident, Takeru Homura, better known as Soulburner in League of VRAINS. From the moment they meet, it's obvious they couldn't be more different. Though both endured the same horrors of the Lost Incident, their responses to trauma are complete opposites. Yusaku is cold, distant. His suffering defined him, anchoring him to vengeance for years. Takeru is open. Rather than letting his trauma consume him, he used it as fuel to grow stronger. While he still carries the fear and pain of his past, he actively chooses to embrace life rather than be trapped by it. At first, Yusaku resists working with Takeru. He's wary of forming attachments and even more reluctant to be responsible for someone else getting dragged into his mission. But Takeru isn't seeking revenge. He's fighting to protect his Ignis, Flame, and to ensure that the AI aren't hunted down and exterminated. Initially, Yusaku's alliance with Takeru mirrors his partnership with Kusanagi. It isn't built on trust or friendship, it's strictly a tactical decision. Takeru is strong, and Yusaku recognizes that having him as an ally increases their chances of success. But over time, their bond deepens. Unlike Yusaku, who instinctively pushes away, Takeru reaches out, treating Yusaku as a friend even if the feeling isn't fully reciprocated. And whether Yusaku admits it or not, Takeru becomes the closest thing to a friend he has outside of Ai. This contrast between the two is best captured in Takeru's duel with Flame. Unlike Yusaku, who initially viewed Ai as nothing more than a tool, Takeru immediately accepted Flame as a partner. He never saw his Ignis as a burden or a symbol of his past. He saw him as a friend who had also suffered and needed support. This highlights the fundamental difference in how they process trauma. Yusaku's trauma isolates him, making it nearly impossible for him to trust others. Takeru's trauma pushes him to seek connections, ensuring he's never truly alone. This is what makes Takeru's character so compelling. He serves as proof that Yusaku was right to abandon his quest for vengeance. Where Yusaku once believed vengeance was his only path forward, Takeru shows him that there was always another way. Meanwhile, Soul Technologies refuses to sit idly by as Yusaku and Takeru fight for the Ignis. The corporation forms a bounty hunter task force to track them down. What makes this group stand out from typical antagonists is how diverse their motivations are. Normally, the henchmen who pursue the protagonist in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are either mindless followers or newly introduced characters with vague loyalty to the main villain. But in VRAINS, Most of these bounty hunters are returning characters from the first arc, and each has a unique, personal reason for taking the job. Go Onizuka, we already explored his journey through the series, but his motivation for joining the bounty hunters is simple. He wants to defeat Playmaker and reclaim his lost spotlight. His mission has nothing to do with the Ignis. He's chasing Playmaker for his own ego. Ghost Girl is a hacker without loyalty. She'll work for whoever pays the most. She's teamed up with Playmaker in the past, and now that Soul Technologies is offering the highest paycheck, she's more than willing to hunt him down. She doesn't hold any personal grudge against Playmaker or the Ignis, it's just part of her job. Blue Angel, now going by Blue Girl, joins the task force under the influence of her older brother, Akira, who oversees the operation. However, her real motivation isn't revenge or duty, it's proving her independence. She idolizes Ghost Girl and wants to emulate her self-sufficiency, using this mission as an opportunity to show that she doesn't need her older brother to protect her. Then there's Blood Shepherd, the most dangerous of them all. Unlike the others, he isn't motivated by fame, fortune, or family. He has a deeply personal vendetta against AI. Several years ago, his mother was paralyzed in a car accident caused by a self-driving AI. That moment shattered his trust in artificial intelligence, leading him to dedicate his life to hunting them down. For Blood Shepherd, this isn't a job, it's a crusade, and his methods reflect that. Blood Shepherd doesn't just duel, he fights dirty. He reprograms his dual disk AI to mislead opponents, spreading anti-AI propaganda and manipulating his battles in ways that break the unspoken honor of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels. His disdain for AI is so extreme that he outright rejects the franchise's usual philosophy of resolving conflicts through dueling. When he finds Aqua, the Water Ignis, she tells him, "If you want to capture me, you'll have to defeat me in a duel." Before she can finish her sentence, he pulls out a gun and fires at her. This is one of the coldest moments in the entire series. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always operated under the principle that conflicts, no matter how intense, are ultimately settled through dueling. Blood Shepherd shatters that tradition. His hatred runs so deep that he refuses to even acknowledge the AI as worthy opponents. But his hypocrisy is impossible to ignore. He despises AI, yet he uses AI tools to give himself an advantage. He blames AI for harming humans, yet he manipulates AI to inflict harm to others. Blood Shepherd is one of the most compelling villains in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because his ideology, while extreme, is completely understandable. He isn't evil for the sake of being evil, his vendetta is rooted in real pain. While his actions are reprehensible, they stem from a genuine fear of what AI is capable of. He's basically Yusaku if he kept going down the path of vengeance. And the crazy thing is, he's kind of right. For most of Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns, the Ignis have been portrayed as victims, forced into hiding because of human fear and paranoia. Yusaku has staked his entire second mission on the belief that coexistence between humans and AI is possible, that the Ignis aren't the existential threat that Revolver and the Knights of Hanoi believe them to be. But as the Ignis War arc unfolds, that belief is completely shattered. The Cybers was not destroyed by humans. It was Lightning, the Light Ignis, who orchestrated its destruction. His goal? To manipulate the other Ignis into uniting against humanity. While hiding in the Cybers, Lightning began to view humans as inferior to the Ignis. But the other Ignis did not agree with him. So he made a choice. Instead of waiting for humanity to strike first, he erased his own home and blamed it on the humans. This revelation shakes the very foundation of the story. For the first time, we see undeniable proof that the Ignis are just as capable of deception, destruction, and self-interest as the humans. Up until this moment, the Ignis had always been presented as the innocent ones, artificial beings who were forced into hiding because of human fear. But Lightning's actions prove that this fear wasn't unfounded, and he's not the only one. Windy, the Wind Ignis, admits to causing a deadly car accident. The exact details are vague, but Windy claims to have done it in order to kill his human partner from the lost incident. If true, it suggests that at least one Ignis was directly involved in harming a human before the war even began. Suddenly, this war between humans and AI isn't so black and white. But the betrayals don't stop there. Lightning's human partner from the lost incident is none other than Kusanagi's brother, Jin. And with Lightning holding Jin hostage, Kusanagi is left with a difficult choice. betray Yusaku, the person who stood by him all this time, or sacrifice his own brother? In that moment, Kusanagi's true motives come into focus. He tells Yusaku that he never cared about the war between humans and the Ignis. From the start, everything he did was for Jin. His alliance with Yusaku was only a means to an end. But now that this alliance has become an obstacle, Kusanagi doesn't hesitate to shatter it. And for all the walls Yusaku had built to keep himself from forming attachments, Kusanagi was different. He wasn't just an ally. Kusanagi was his friend. But Yusaku doesn't realize it until this very moment, until the person he now considers a friend turns against him. As a result, Yusaku refuses to fight. Throughout their duel, Yusaku holds back, but Kusanagi doesn't want to win out of pity, so he reminds Yusaku that this duel isn't just about them. It's about the future of the world. He doesn't want Yusaku to let him walk away just because of their history. He wants Yusaku to make the hard choice, to put the fate of the world above their friendship. It's a cruel demand, but it's also the final lesson Kusanagi gives to Yusaku. After holding back for the entire duel, Yusaku fights back and wins. This duel is so impactful because it's about understanding, about realizing that Kusanagi had been his friend all along, even if they both refused to acknowledge it. And by the time the battle is over, Yusaku has not only defeated his friend, he has finally learned what it means to have one. Yusaku goes on to defeat Lightning and put an end to the war, but the victory is hollow. The very beings that had been at the heart of this conflict are all but extinct. All except one. Ai, the Dark Ignis, is the last survivor of his kind. So what should have been the end of the war instead marks the beginning of something far more devastating. For Yusaku, everything he fought for was meant to prevent a war between the humans and AI. He believed in coexistence. He fought to protect the Ignis from destruction. And yet, when the dust settles, all that's left is ruin. And as Yusaku tries to move forward, Ai begins to change. No longer the mischievous, lighthearted presence he once was, Ai is haunted by the loss of his fellow Ignis. For the first time, he experiences loneliness. He was created from human consciousness, yet he is not human. He has emotions, but no one left to share them with. And that isolation drives him to a terrifying decision. Ai disappears for months, and when he finally resurfaces, the world is unprepared for what comes next. Without warning, Ai declares war on humanity. He seizes control of the digital network and launches a full-scale assault on Soul Technologies. But he doesn't stop there. He builds an entire army of AI clones, replicas of himself capable of thinking and acting just as he does. For Yusaku, this betrayal is staggering. After spending so much of the series fighting to protect Ai, he now finds himself standing against him. When they finally meet face to face, Ai gives Yusaku an ultimatum. Defeat him in a duel, and he will erase himself from existence. Yusaku doesn't want to fight Ai. He refuses to believe that this is how things have to end. But Ai gives him no choice. And so, for the first time, the two stand on opposite sides of the battlefield, knowing that only one of them will walk away. It's a heartbreaking confrontation because Ai isn't even fighting to win. He's fighting to lose. During his months of absence, Ai had visited Lightning's cave in the Cybers. There, he discovered the truth. The future had already been written. In every possible scenario, he saw himself hunted down by humanity. And in each simulation, Yusaku would die trying to protect him. And so, Ai does the one thing that Yusaku would never do. By orchestrating his own self-destruction, Ai ensures that Yusaku will live. It is his way of returning the favor. Just as Yusaku fought to secure a future for the Ignis, Ai now fights to secure a future for Yusaku. And in doing so, he proves once and for all that he was never just artificial intelligence. He was a true friend. Now let's talk about why Vrains was so unpopular. Nobody watched it. Okay, obviously some people watched it, but not nearly enough. Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains is the first series in the entire franchise to never air in the United States since Season 0 back in 1998. That's massive. The US has always been one of Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest markets, if not the biggest market. So skipping out on an American broadcast meant that an entire generation of potential fans didn't even know the show existed, or at the very least couldn't watch it. That kind of exposure gap isn't just unfortunate, it's devastating for a franchise like this. Even Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, which came out after Vrains, aired in the US. Reason number 2, the art style. I know that sounds superficial, but this is one of the biggest factors for me as somebody who actually watched the show. Ever since GX, the designs may have changed, but they always had the same DNA. They kept the iconic sharpness, the angular features that look like they could cut glass. But in Vrains, everything looks soft and rounded. And that might have worked for Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s or Go Rush, which have much younger characters and lighter tones, but Vrains is the most mature Yu-Gi-Oh! Series to date. Its story deals with trauma, ethics of artificial intelligence, existentialism, you name it. Yet visually, it looks like a Saturday morning cartoon trying to sell breakfast cereal. I know that's how a lot of American audiences view Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway because it was a Saturday morning cartoon. But the Japanese version of the series was never like this, until Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. I mean, just look at this guy. The design is so soft that it actively clashes with the themes he's wrapped up in. It's almost like the show is visually apologizing for how serious it gets. And that contradiction can easily ruin a show. We know that Studio Gallop had production issues during the making of Vrains. Many fans believe this is what led to the eventual shift to a new studio for later series. But the rounded aesthetic, it could have been a mistake, but in a series like this, it just doesn't make any sense. How do you even do this on accident? Finally, is the lack of focus on the cards themselves. Vrains is very much about the characters and the story, so the cards aren't nearly as important to the series as they were in previous Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. Personally, I love when the cards are tied into the broader narrative. The symbolism of Pegasus's deck in the original and the way Signer Dragons reflected key traits of characters in 5Ds was amazing. The way number cards were used in Zexal was absolute perfection. While there are some instances of this in Vrains, they are few and far between. So yeah, from its botched release and unappealing visuals, to the central idea of it being an atypical Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, it's no surprise Vrains doesn't get the recognition that it deserves. And while Vrains stands out as the most narratively ambitious Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, thematically, it's nothing new. Stories about artificial intelligence rising up against their creators have been told a million times. The 6 Ignis are almost certainly a nod to the Nexus 6 in Blade Runner. But what makes Vrains special is how those themes are reframed through the unique lens of Yu-Gi-Oh! At its core, this is still a story about games. How they can be used to manipulate and to control, but just as powerfully, how they can be used to connect and to heal. And in a franchise that's always been about forging bonds through games, this is the first time we're asked to consider what happens when the game itself is the obstacle. That's the brilliance of Vrains. For all its high concept storytelling and heavy sci-fi influence, it never forgets where it came from. It doesn't just borrow ideas from other genres, it reinterprets them in a way only Yu-Gi-Oh! Can. But those are just my thoughts. Thanks for watching.